It's not often we get to shoot a localizer type directional aid or LDA approach, so let's have a look at this one into Van Nuys, California. We start off following an airway inbound to the Van Nuys VOR, which is the transition for us here. This approach, the LDA Charlie, is a circling only approach. It uses a localizer for lateral guidance, but unlike an ILS approach, does not use a glide slope for vertical guidance, so it's a non-precision approach. Let's start off by checking the NOTAM. It mentions an amendment to the missed approach procedure, which now has us climbing to 4,000 on the Van Nuys Radial 101 to the AMTRA intersection and holding. The AMTRA intersection isn't shown on the approach plate. We'll find it to the southeast, closer to LA, about 25 miles from the VOR. Given how complex the airspace is around here, the odds are extremely good that we'll be given some other instructions almost immediately after contacting approach on the missed. Let's do a brief of the approach because there are a few fun things here we won't see on a lot of procedures. First, as we mentioned, the LDA uses a localizer for guidance, but it's not aligned with the runway at all. In fact, this localizer isn't even found on the airport. It's more than 5 miles to the east at nearby Burbank Airport. Leveraging another airport's approach aids is definitely not something you see very often. From the Van Nuys VOR, we fly out of the 242 radial to Silex, the initial approach fix. We identify Silex with either DME or using the cross radial from the Los Angeles VOR or the localizer course. After flying inbound, we identify Silex once again as the point on the localizer course where we intercept that radial from the Los Angeles VOR. On the final approach segment, we see that the missed approach point is the Buddy intersection. Interestingly, this is the outer marker for the localizer for the Burbank Airport, that other one to the east. It just so happens that the marker is located just at the field so we can use it as our missed approach point. So aircraft shooting the ILS into runway 8 at Burbank will be using this same intersection as their final approach fix, but don't worry, they have a strict altitude restriction of 3,000 feet, so they stay above you. Since we're using Burbank's localizer, we will also pick up Burbank's glide slope. The note in the profile view says to ignore those indications because we're not going to Burbank, and this non-precision approach doesn't have any vertical guidance. Okay, let's fly the approach. We're at 6,000 for our cruise, inbound to the Van Nuys VOR, and we've been cleared for the approach. When we cross the VOR, we turn to 242 to track the radial towards Silex. We'll twist the OBS on nav 1 to set 242 as the course. We can drop down to 4,400 now. Let's put the localizer into nav 2, 109.5, and flip it active. This is how we'll identify when we're at Silex. Later on, we'll want the Los Angeles VOR, so we'll put that 113.6 on standby. Let's also put the localizer on nav 1 standby, since when we are on the final approach course, we'd like to use nav 1 to track. We level off at 4,400. We're looking for where we meet the localizer course on nav 2 to tell when we've reached Silex and can begin our course reversal. Once there, we're doing a teardrop entry, so we turn to 229 degrees and begin timing 1 minute outbound, switching nav 1 over to the localizer and setting the inbound course of 079. We'll be descending, this time down to 3,700. This is our course reversal altitude and will be no lower than that as we execute this. We're going to switch nav 2 so that we're now tracking the LAX VOR, and we'll twist the OBS to 316 as shown on the plate. This is how we'll tell that we've reached Silex the second time inbound. After the minute is up, we make our turn inbound to get established. We level off at 3,700, and once we're established on the inbound course, we can go down to 3,400, the crossing altitude at Silex. We'll be looking for both needles to be centered, which will tell us we've reached Silex and can go down to the circling MDA of 1,500. Remember, we're ignoring the glide slope indications because those are guiding us to a different airport. Once we're on the final approach segment, we'll be handed off to Tower, who will issue us our landing clearance and circling instructions. We'll put the Van Nuys VOR on nav 2 now and set the radial we saw in the NOTAM for the amended missed approach procedure. We'll break out of the clouds and see the runway aligned perpendicular to us. Now here's the fun part. Just as we fly over to begin a left downwind for runway 16 left, the outer marker beacon goes off, signaling the missed approach point. For aircraft going into Burbank, which you may be able to see off in the distance there, this same beacon indicates the final approach fix. Well, we've got the runway in sight and can start our circle. So it's just an interesting approach, but with a proper brief and chair flying, it's really nothing different than anything else you've come across. Be sure to check out Flight Insight Ground Schools at the link here or in the description to take your training to the next level. See you there.